My son was in that near fatal car crash, and it was a vehicle that had collided with a salvaged truck or a truck hauling salvage vehicles. And it was so bad that when the rescue team arrived, they didn't know which car he was in because it had been damaged so severely. They told me he probably wouldn't make it. And then they told me he probably would never walk again, and he would be mentally challenged for the rest of his life. It was a miracle. They all called him the miracle child. And then when I got breast cancer, I even am challenged sometimes to say I'm a survivor, because for me, that holds a mentality that at some point I was a victim to it. And I like to think it doesn't define who I am. It was just a part of my journey.
Hi, Billie Jean. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Mark. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me to share your space on your podcast.
Of course. Today, you live the life of a passionate leader, a coach, but your journey here was nothing short of a miracle of its own. You're a survivor of breast cancer, and your son had a miraculous recovery from a fatal car crash. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, gosh. So the breast cancer journey for me was really a big turning point. But prior to that, my son was in that near fatal car crash. And that was when I really learned about the power of positive thinking and mindfulness. So he was 16. He was a track star, and he was in a very serious crash. And it was a vehicle that had collided with a salvaged truck or a truck hauling salvage vehicles. And it was so bad that when the rescue team arrived, they didn't know which car he was in because it had been damaged so severely. The girl, unfortunately, didn't make it. It was instant for her. He was life flighted to the hospital, and they told me he probably wouldn't make it. And then they told me he probably would never walk again, and he would be mentally challenged for the rest of his life. And today he's a thriving father of 3. And yeah, he came out of it. It was a miracle. They all called him the miracle child. It was well published all over the news, so everyone knew who he was, and we had a tremendous amount of community support. And that was one of the big things that taught me about mindfulness and positive thinking. And then when I got breast cancer, it was the same thing. And I even am challenged sometimes to say I'm a survivor, because for me, that holds a mentality that at some point I was a victim to it. And I like to think it doesn't define who I am. It was just a part of my journey. And so I just really got focused on learning more about mindfulness and how thinking impacts you. And here I am today.
Incredible. Before this thing happened with your son, describe Billie Jean prior to this event. Because obviously, after the event and after breast cancer and all of that, your life completely changed, right? Yeah. Not only your mindset, the way you look at things, resilience within you. But who was Billie Jean before all of this?
I always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted to be a parent. And I always looked at life through what I believed at the time to be a positive lens, but I also had a tremendous amount of self-hate is a strong word, but I really didn't like myself very much. I always felt like I was less than everybody else. All my friends were prettier than me and skinnier than me, and they had more money than me. We grew up very poor. So I went through life with what I believed at the time was a positive approach, but it was really just getting day to day and paycheck to paycheck and just living the life that I was dealt. And so while I was always upbeat and happy inside, I had this challenge, this turmoil that nobody really knew about. I was also in a really violent relationship for a while, but because maybe that's what I thought I should deserve at the time, I don't know. I went through having an eating disorder that was very serious. It put me in the hospital for a while. And so I was just, struggling through. And so I was always happy, but inside I had a lot of turmoil.
Before anything else, it takes incredible amount of courage to be able to come on a show and talk about these vulnerabilities, especially in a world where we are so used to peacocking, where we're trying to make everybody look like we're so perfect. So thank you for the vulnerability, and thank you for sharing the Billie Jean behind this version now, right? Because everybody has an origin story. And those who are listening to this can perhaps relate to both versions of you.
Yeah.
When you are thinking about that older version of yourself, the person that maybe perhaps didn't like herself the most, right? And you got into relationships, looking back at it, you're thinking, man, what was I thinking? If somebody's in this position right now, in a relationship they need to get out of, right? Or they don't like themselves very much for whatever reason, what would you tell yourself, the older version of you?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I would say you need to start now. You literally can change everything if you just start now. And it's as simple as 5 seconds a day being mindful, or 30 minutes a day of being grounded and focused and intentional. And rather than reacting to life because of what happens to you, using all of that energy to intentionally act rather than react. I would say start now.
And you talk about this a lot, right? You talk about the harnessing the power of the inner strength.
Yeah.
But it's scary because sometimes, as bad as things are, they're comfortable. And it's almost always, it's too good to leave, but it's too bad to stay.
Yeah.
So where do you get that inner push to just do that extra 5 seconds of work, or 10 of work, and inching along?
Yeah. I think when you're in that type of a situation, it's a choice. And you have to accept that you are, in fact, choosing to stay because it's comfortable. But I promise you, taking the steps to have the life you want might be a little uncomfortable, but it's a different kind of discomfort. It's not painful. It's exciting and maybe even challenging. And while it is discomfort, it's not painful. It doesn't have to be a painful change. It can be a very positive change. And I do find too that when, for me and people I've spoken to since then, people who are in a life where maybe they are in a bad relationship or they're suffering from some type of disorder, what's not right, you're not being kind to yourself, but you accept it. So knowing that can allow you to change. You can choose to say, man, I know that I shouldn't be doing this to myself anymore. You have to want it.
For you, was that pivotal moment with your son's incident that did shook you up and realized that you need to be a different version of you?
Yeah. So I have a boy and a girl, but I had another son who was born when my firstborn was 5 years old, and he didn't make it. So that I had to actually sign papers to terminate life support on my newborn son. And that pretty much rocked me to my core. And I think in those incredibly desperate days that followed, I would have given up. I honestly would have. I would have given up. I wanted to give up, but I knew I couldn't because I had a young son still at home who needed me. But I think that was when everything changed for me. And I realized if I don't take a hold of this and choose something better for myself, it's going to take a hold of me and I don't know what's going to happen. So that was probably the moment that really started the journey, that the very long journey that I've been on to change everything.
The moment when this happened and you had this realization that if I don't get in control of this moment right now, life is going to take over me. And then we're headed into a really deep, dark place.
Yeah.
What were the next couple of days like? What were some of the steps that you took? Because somebody might be listening to this and thinking, what do I do? What are some techniques? What are some steps?
I had to remind myself of what was good in that day, in that moment. And it can be as generic as fresh air to breathe. And for some reason, running water hit my list a lot. I started making a gratitude list every day, which I still do today. 3 things in the morning and in the evening of that I'm grateful for. And it doesn't have to be big. You may feel like you have nothing to be grateful for because you've lost everything. And how do you even imagine a life without everything that you lost? But there's always something to be grateful for. So I started making a list, and I still put running water on my list a lot because it's crazy to me to think of all the people who don't have that gift that we have to be able to brush their teeth, the simple thing of brushing your teeth and washing your face. And so you find little things to be grateful for and you focus on those. And then you start finding bigger things to be grateful for.
And isn't that crazy that sometimes we just get so caught up in the minutiae of life and we're so focused on the next best thing that we just don't have, that we forget about the little things like the running water, the heat in the winter, the AC in the hot Texas summer.
Yes.
So it's crazy that you bring these things up because almost always we just forget about all of these. We just take them for granted.
When I first start working with clients, one thing I have them do, I do suggest a gratitude list. But the task I give them for their first task is to give me a gratitude list of 100 items, 100 things that you're grateful for. Yeah. Because you can pop out 10, 20. That's easy, right? You start, my house, my clothes, but then you have to really start thinking about all the things in your life that you do take for granted. And it can really help shift your perspective on, holy cow, I truly am blessed. Even though I may be in a challenging situation, man, I have a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah, I love that. Anybody listening, that's a great one. Actually, I'm going to do that myself. 100 things.
It's hard, man.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard because you really have to start looking at everything in your life, but it's also very humbling
Yeah.
because, man, we do take a lot for granted.
A lot of what you're talking about is about mindfulness. What about faith? Did faith play any role in any of this?
Yeah, I was raised in a household where my papa on this side was a preacher and my mama had Cherokee Choctaw Indian background. And so I feel like I had such a gift of religion and spirituality. So I have a pretty broad lens for faith. So whatever you call faith, you have to believe in something bigger. So when I got the breast cancer diagnosis, it did shake my faith a little. And right before I went in to have so I had a bilateral mastectomy. And right before I did that, I decided I needed to restore my faith somehow. So I took a trip to New Mexico because there's so much there as far as spirituality and religion. And they have a gondola there, and it's the tallest one in the United States. Tallest or longest ride. I think it's the highest one, something like that. But I'm terrified of those things, Mark. I can't even do the one at the amusement park that takes you from this end to the other. Nope. I'll walk, thank you, because those things terrify me. But I thought if I could just ride that, if I could get over that, I could pretty much do anything. And so when I got there, it was just this crazy like compilation of things that happened I said I want to restore my faith, and here it was. The girl at the rental car kept talking about this restaurant that I needed to go eat at. And I really I don't want your recommendations. I just want my car. Like I have a place to go, right? Then I went to my hotel and went check in my room, and it was disgusting. It was such a nice hotel, but the room was. So I asked for another room, and I got in there, and the bedding was pretty much the same. So I said, I'm not staying here. And I found another hotel. And after I got checked in, I took a walk, and guess what restaurant I happened to walk by? Out of nowhere, I happened into this restaurant that she said, you have to eat here. So I was like, I guess I have to eat here. So I went there and had to wait for a table, which I never do. If there's like a 45-minute wait, this girl's leaving and finding another place to go. But I decided to wait. And while I was sitting outside, an elderly couple came by waiting for a table. They didn't have a place to sit, so I invited them to sit with me. And he had a breast cancer awareness band on. So I talked to them, and they were telling me that they had come from the Church of the Healing Dirt. The formal name of it escapes me right now, but they said, you have to go, you have to go. And I thought, okay. And so in that moment, I'm like, I see you working, which I say a lot because whatever higher power you believe in, if you're just open to things, they'll show themselves to you. So I decided to journey over there, got lost, supposed to take the high road to Taos. I took the road to Taos. But when I got lost, I turned around in a parking lot, and there was a church there, and there was two old ladies on the porch drinking coffee. So rewind just a little bit. My sister kept telling me, when you go there, I saw this on the Travel Channel, you have to go to this coffee shop called Two Old Ladies. And I was like, yeah, I'll go. I wasn't going to go. I'm like, yeah, I'll go. So there they are, two old ladies drinking coffee. So I asked them for directions, and they explained to me my mistake. But then right here, the church, the name of the church was the San Franciscan Church. I'm a San Francisco native, so I thought it was no sweet coincidence. So I went in there to the church. Had I not found the restaurant, met the people, taken the wrong road, I would have never been in that place, but I was. And then the next day I went back and went to the Church of the Healing Dirt. And as I'm sitting in there in the pews and just, praying and doing my thing, I start hearing behind me like angels singing. I don't know how else to explain it. It was very angelic, but it's not an active church. It's a former church. They don't have services. And I looked to my friend who was with me, and I go, do you hear that? Because I thought maybe I was losing it a little. Then all of a sudden this procession comes in, and they're holding banners, and they're led by two people with banners, but there's just hundreds of people, and they all fill in the pews. So now we scoot way over to the end, and they fill in the pews, and they're standing in the back. And then the priest comes up, and it was the one day a year that they have service in that church. These people have a migration, and it takes them to this church where they have a service. Again, had I not been taken off track. And so it was so overwhelming that I happened to be there in that moment. And then the priest gets up, and he starts his sermon with, today we have come to the end of our road. I know you've been on a journey seeking to find your answers. and today you get your answers. And I was like, is he talking to me? Yeah. So it was just this incredible explosion of, I said I needed to restore my faith, and be careful what you ask for, because it just may be given to you.
And the sequence of events. So many times in life, we have got into so many conversations where people are talking about, oh, that's just a coincidence. But there's a difference between a coincidence and a divine providence. You're going to a hotel and not having a room that you like, and going to a different room and not having a room, and then happening to go by this restaurant that you were told earlier to go to that you didn't ignore. And then you just inviting somebody in a breast cancer ring and the two ladies in the coffee cup. Anybody that would look at this and say it's a coincidence, maybe they need to re-examine what magic really means and what the magic lies in life. Going back to the moment, though, I want to go back to the moment where you said when you got diagnosed with breast cancer, for a short amount of time, you felt like you lost faith. And this is at this point in your life, you're coming from obviously the tragic event of the child that passed away, and then a near fatal crash of another car. But you had gotten back on your feet after those events, and you had become a different person. What was it about the breast cancer diagnosis that really shook you to your core, where you felt that, oh my gosh, I don't know what to think anymore?
I hate to admit this, but I had a bit of a pity party. Not so much why me, but more of a, I don't understand. I was so young at the time. I was so young, and no one in my family had it. And I don't know. I just really started to question everything I believed. For some reason, I felt like it doesn't make sense. This just doesn't make sense. And what do I even believe in anymore if all of this positive thinking and praying gets me breast cancer? I can tell you that it literally lasted a day, because the next day I made my decision to choose the actions that made me feel better about having it. But I did. It shook me for a minute, because I just thought, what am I doing all this positive stuff for if this is the result?
Your entire life is just a testimony of events that are happening, and that's causing you to question things, but then also finding answers. Once you've found those answers, you're a better version of you. Like every time something's happening, you're becoming a 2.0 version, 3.0 version. This power that you have now accumulated and distributing and sharing with your clients now, whether it be the cognitive reframing, looking at things differently, whether it be finding compassion with yourself or associated with accountability, what are the type of problems that your clients usually come to you for now that you're helping them?
One of the biggest is I work a lot with improving company culture, and that starts with the leadership, but you can't forget the workforce. And so I help with improving company culture. And ironically, one of the top issues is communication and making employees feel like they're valued by their employer. We've known for decades that communication is the number one problem in organizations. It comes out year after year, and yet here we are. It still is communication. I start with attacking company culture and challenging the way of thinking of how we used to do it, because the landscape is so different now. We have 3 generations in the workplace. We have hybrid and remote workers. It's not like it used to be. And leadership can't be just telling people what to do. You should be building people up and empowering them. So that's really what I do. I usually I start at the CEO and leadership level, but then try to have them roll out programs that include everybody in the company. Because honestly, a lot of the people who aren't in leadership really want to be. They just need help getting there.
So if I'm a leader of an organization, however much the size is, and I want to transform that company, like I want to change the company culture, what are the first couple of things you tell them to do when you're giving them a consultation?
I always have to make sure I understand what their needs really are and what they want. What do they see as an improved culture, right? I can't tell them what a better culture is for their organization. So I do always have to start with, what do you want out of this? How do you want your employees to feel? What's your end game? Usually it's retention and satisfaction. With that, I typically try to tackle the first area, which is communication, rollout communication. A lot of organizations don't even notify when people are hired or fired. So they'll come into different departments and introduce someone, but when someone's let go, companies try to bury that. You can't bury that, because then people are going to talk about it, and it just creates an environment for gossip. So you have to have open communication about changes that are happening in your organization, people who are coming and going. You don't have to tell them why, but not hiding it lets employees feel like they are a part of the team and that they are valued and that leadership understands those things do matter. The second things I try to have them implement is a no gossip policy. That's always a big one too, because encouraging gossip or even allowing gossip can really destroy a workplace. So starting to set that standard of no gossip policy. If someone comes to you and wants to complain about another employee, that's not what you're there for. You complain up and communicate out. If someone has a complaint, they should be complaining to their management or going up. They shouldn't be complaining across. They should be communicating across.
So how do we do that though? Because what happens, you're working, things are not well, you have been working with somebody for a couple of years, you are friends, right? As friends, you're having lunch and you're talking about how is your day going? And the person says, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened. And it just all of a sudden becomes this, without sometimes even intending to, it becomes a complaining situation or a pity party or gossip. If I am listening to this, and I know you're talking about it at a corporate level, but at an individual level, if I am somebody listening to this, I'm like, you know what? I always tend to just complain and gossip. What are some things I can do to an individual to stop that behavior?
Man, one of the things that really changed my perspective for ownership and awareness, I had a boss who, he was very challenging. He actually was such a micromanager that he sat behind me in an open office. But when people wanted to talk to me about work, they had to walk past my desk and ask him for permission and then come and talk to me. And I would get so frustrated. And I did find that I was talking about it a lot. And I knew I needed to change because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to just always complain. You don't want to be that person, right? I found the quote that still hangs in my office that changed everything for me on this topic. And it was, he didn't make you angry. You chose anger as a response. So by just educating people and sharing a thought like that to say, do you really want to change what you're doing? First of all, they have to want to change. They have to want some level of change. But that challenged me for a long time. Days I would look at it and he would come and do something and I would get mad and I would read that and I would say, yeah, but, and then I would justify it because of what he did. But never once could I make it make sense that I chose to be angry about it. It's a choice, right? And so I say self-awareness and say, do you want to complain or do you want to talk about good things? Because what you put out, you get back. And if you want to start to change how you approach things, you have to change how you receive things.
But at what point do you because what you're talking about is so valuable. It's not just important in a corporate company culture. It's also true in relationships. How many times does it happen that the wife is telling the husband, you need to do this or do that, and he's just ignoring it or not doing it or vice versa. And It's okay. I'm not going to react to it. I'm just going to stay exactly what you said. Like I have the choice to react to it. And at some point it starts building up. And unless there is a way to let that out, it almost always ends in an explosion or an implosion, right? So what is the next step? Is there a next step to controlling that and letting it out somehow or communicating it?
I think there's two sides to that. So one side is you have to choose to see it differently and find a way that makes you feel better about it. So I have to go to Austin to do training sometimes. And my first experience with Austin traffic, now remember, I'm a California girl, so I know about traffic, but you always know when you're close to Austin city limits, because for those of you who don't know, it's gas, brake. And the first couple of times, like, what is happening? But it's something in the Austin area that's gas, brake. And it was very frustrating. So here's what I chose to do. And this is an example of how you can choose to see it differently. People, you always know when someone's going to cut you off. You see them coming, you see them driving crazy, you know they're going to cut you off. I decided that whenever I saw someone who I think might cut me off, that I would let them in. I would invite them over. And when I invited them over, I would say, come on over. Because really, what did I lose? 2 seconds maybe of my overall drive, but it changed how I felt while I was driving, because now when someone wants to cut me off, I'm like, come on over. I hope you have a good day. So I'm not only giving it to myself, I'm giving it to them. And hopefully you have a good day today. But now I'm not frustrated by the traffic. I see it as an opportunity to just say, I'm going to change my day. And if you're frustrated about doing dishes or cleaning the house, and I couldn't tell you how frustrated I get at dirty ice cream bowls in the other side of the sink. There's 2 sides to the sink. They don't both have to have dirty dishes. So what I chose to do there was look at it and say, okay, what, and again, it all comes back to gratitude. What do I have to be grateful for? Honestly, Mark, I'm grateful that I have food to eat. I'm grateful that I have dishes up in my cupboard. I'm grateful that I have people in my home to dirty the dishes and I have family around me. And I found so many things in that sink that I was grateful for. It's weird, but now, and I still do it. If I look in the sink, I have to check myself. That's maybe one key too. It doesn't happen overnight. It's an ongoing process, but it's also an ongoing choice. So when I see it, if it triggers me at all, I just say, wait a minute, I'm so lucky to have this dish in this sink, in this house, in this neighborhood. And now it happens rapid, but in the first, it took a little effort.
Plus, what you're saying also makes sense because in the example of traffic, right? Someone cuts you in. One of the reasons we feel upset is also is because of the shock factor, which almost always comes from the lack of control. That I was in my lane, I was doing my thing, and all of a sudden just came in and I just had to brake. Allowing someone to just come on in and lose that 1.5 seconds. Now it gives us that control so that we are not yanked out of our state of mind.
You're exactly right. You're controlling the situation and rather than the emotions controlling you.
You are obviously extremely talented because of the experiences that you have gone through life, the lessons you have learned, the transformative moments that you have gone through. Motherhood has allowed you to become a whole different person.
Yeah.
And I always say this, suffering teaches us wisdom that books don't.
Yeah.
Life teaches us lessons that you just don't learn from watching documentaries.
Yeah.
What are some lessons as a mother that you have learned that has shaped you to be this business leader you are today?
I would say patience, for one, that crosses over universally. Patience and not judging people for where they are, right? Because your kids come home and they do and say some things that really, but remembering that this is their first time being a kid and that they're doing the best they can with what they have, which is a huge, valuable thought to have. This person is doing the best they can with what they have at the time. It can help you to not be so judgmental, which is usually where feelings come in because you're judging somebody else's behavior. And that was valuable for me too. And that crosses over into my training now because you can't judge someone for their actions and react to them. You have a conversation with them and you make sure that there are clear borders and lines and that they understand expectations. And if not, then it turns into a tough love thing, which is also what you have to do with your kids when they get off track. And so I think learning acceptance and patience and to not judge them really helped me see things differently.
Your journey, it starts out as a healing journey. Then it
Yeah.
becomes a journey of personal development. Then it becomes a journey of believing in a bigger cause that leads you to now be a business leader, transforming individual lives and corporations. What are some ways people can find you so that they can work with you?
So my website is BJR Solutions and all of my programs are listed on there. I also post on TikTok and it reaches a unique audience because it's not just people in the workplace who need help. And so I post on TikTok and on YouTube as well at BillieJeanRing.com.
Inner growth, resilience, compassion, self-care, and above all, ability to forgive oneself so that we could allow ourselves to be the next version of ourselves. You are the embodiment of all of these feelings and all of these thoughts. And I couldn't have spent a better afternoon speaking to anybody else, Billie Jean. It was such a pleasure having you on the show. Any last word for our audience members?
Thank you. That's very humbling. You have an amazing story yourself, but thank you for your kind words. I guess I'll just leave you with this thought that it's your choice. If you want to feel better and do better, you have to choose better for yourself, and you absolutely deserve it.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Billie Jean. I hope we talk again soon.
Thank you, Mark.